Guess that's political and social commentator James Melville. James, I sent you a little note earlier saying somewhat facetiously, but I kind of believe it. If there's one thing British politicians hate most, it's democracy, because it's vague and they can't necessarily win. So we're learning today that should he become the next Prime Minister, and there's a terrifying possibility that he will, Keir Starmer's first move is going to be to enfranchise, to give the vote to more than 3 million EU nationals, Europeans, who live here, and also to lower the voting age to 16. So young people, 16 and 17-year-olds, inevitably tend to be towards the left as opposed to the other way around. So he stands accused of rigging the electorate so that he can have a permanent inbuilt majority for Labour. This is pretty sinister. We've got to be careful with this sort of stuff, haven't we? We've got to stop him.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think 16 and 17-year-olds should have the vote because they are, and that is actually the essence of democracy. They are the future of democracy. They have the skin in the game. They also...
What about EU nationals?
I also think they should as well, if they're paying their taxes and they're registered to various institutions in this country.
Yeah, but if they do this, James, I mean, I take your point, but if they do this, Labour will win every election forever.
That's the thing. We know why Labour are doing this. It is gerrymandering from their point of view. But from true essence of democracy, anyone who is a citizen here, paying their taxes, contributing to society, paying their taxes effectively, as part of the taxes, they're paying for, local authorities, they're paying for government to make decisions, they're paying for opposition parties, they're paying for parliament, they're paying for schools, hospitals, blah, blah, blah. So they have skin in the game. So they should have the say in terms of the vote. That applies 16 to 17-year-olds as well. I mean, obviously in Scotland, the 16 to 17-year-olds, they have democratic rights. I think that first came in the Scottish referendum. We know why political parties do it. We know why, for instance, the SNP did that with the referendum because they thought they had more chance of winning. Labour are doing the same thing. It's obvious. So, their motives are to school the game for their own interest.
Yeah.
But taking a step back from it, I actually think from a democratic point of view, 16, 17-year-olds and also EU nationals who have settled in this country and are contributing to this country and paying taxes, then they should have a say in democracy.
16 and 17-year-olds, okay, I'm sort of on the fence about that. But if we do give them the vote, then we've got to allow them to smoke and drink and do all those other things that adults do, gamble, etc. You can't have people who aren't allowed to smoke or drink but are allowed to vote. So they have to be full adults at the age of 16, not half adults.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's about, for me, we can split hairs in terms of what are the ethics of 16 to 17s and what are the rules in terms of what and how much are they contributing to society. Are they proper adults? But they're going to be. And by the time the next election comes around, say someone who's 16 or 17, they're going to be the next election, 22, 23. So that parliamentary term, they are going to be, whatever the definition of adult is, but they are largely going to be either at higher education or in the workplace. So I think they should have a say in it. It happens in Scotland, and I think it's been largely positive. But I do get your point. The bit we do agree on this is that we know the motives of why certain political parties would want 16, 17-year-olds to vote because,
Because kids tend to veer towards the left. Yeah.
Exactly. So they're not doing it for completely ethical reasons. There is a...
They're not. They're certainly not. And that's
exactly.
That's what I'm trying to get at, James, that it worries me. I mean, I take your point. There's a logic about people who pay taxes and live here, who are adults, perhaps should have the right to take part in our electoral process. I used to live in the States and I wasn't allowed to vote there, even though I lived there, I owned a house, I paid a lot of American tax, wasn't allowed to vote. So there's an argument there. But what does worry me about this scenario, it's not just Keir Starmer. I'm very uneasy about every new Prime Minister. The first act they do is to try and rig the electorate in their favour, to change the voting rules so they'll get more votes at the next election. I mean, that's kind of chicanery, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with that point. I mean, it happens obviously in the States as well, where they change boundaries. It happens in this country, but there's, in terms of boundary tweaks, You know, the Tories have done it. Labour under Blair were doing it as well. The Tories before that were doing it. So that's one form of gerrymandering. And there's kind of voter age being another one as well. And then you don't even get me started on what happens with the House of Lords, where they just stuff their cronies in to try and school the game with votes there as well. It's not, and I think, you know, there's aspects of our democracy that should be settled in the long term. It should be consistent. But I take that point. I do have a problem with changing the rules of the game to make sure there's a sort of power grab that lasts generations by the incumbent government. I think that's wrong. But the other side of it, in terms of who they're wanting into votes, I think there is an argument for that. But I certainly take your point that we all know the real reason why Labour would do this.
Yes, it's quite a terrifying prospect that we have a Labour government forever. But there you are. Let's talk again next week.